Jim Gray, the scientist who sailed into oblivion. Jim Gray wasn't just another computer engineer. He was one of the minds who built the digital world we use today. A Turing Award-winning scientist at Microsoft Research, the man basically rewrote how computers store and handle data. People called him the explorer of information itself. Then, one ordinary Sunday in 2007, he took his sailboat, the Tenacious, out alone from San Francisco Bay to scatter his mother's ashes at sea. By sunset, Jim Gray had vanished. Search teams used everything: satellite imaging, radar sweeps, even volunteers scanning miles of ocean photos online. Nothing. No wreckage, no distress call, just an empty ocean and an unanswered question. How does someone this careful, this precise, simply disappear? Was it a freak storm, engine failure, pirates, suicide, or something we still can't explain? What makes it haunting is who he was, a problem solver, obsessed with tracking and data. If anyone could leave a digital breadcrumb trail, it was Jim Gray, and yet there was none. In an age where every second of our lives is recorded, one of the very architects of that system proved it's still possible to vanish completely. His disappearance became a modern myth in tech circles, a reminder that even the brightest logic can't always decode chaos. Every year when people discuss data loss or unsolved mysteries, Jim Gray's name drifts back like a ghost signal. Proof that sometimes, even in a hyper-connected world, the greatest minds fall into silence no algorithm can find. Grigori Rodchenkov, the chemist who exposed a nation and then vanished. Imagine being the scientist who masterminded an Olympic victory machine, then turning around and detonating it. That's Grigori Rodchenkov, Russia's former anti-doping chief, the man who built a system powerful enough to fake drug tests for an entire country. For years, his Moscow lab secretly swapped athletes' tainted samples through a hidden wall at night. The medals rolled in, the lie grew bigger. Then 2016 hit, and he flipped. Rodchenkov told the world everything, naming names, showing proof, and blowing open one of the greatest sporting scandals in history. Within weeks, 2 of his colleagues mysteriously died. Rodchenkov fled Russia, shaved his beard, and disappeared into U.S. witness protection. Today, no public record shows exactly where he lives, or even if he still uses his own name. Russia called him a traitor. Others call him the bravest whistleblower in modern sports. But the question lingers. Did he redeem himself, or was this guilt turned into survival instinct? Rodchenkov's vanishing isn't just about hiding from assassins, it's about living with what he built. The same science he used to cheat the system became the weapon that exposed it. And now the chemist who once controlled who passed and who failed lives as his own anonymous experiment, erased for telling the truth. Henry Hudson, the explorer who was swallowed by his own discovery. 4 centuries ago, before GPS or global maps, Henry Hudson set sail chasing a dream, the fabled Northwest Passage, a sea route linking Europe and Asia. He was part geographer, part scientist, a man obsessed with measuring the edge of the known world. In 1610, aboard the Discovery, he finally reached the icy waters that would one day bear his name, Hudson Bay. But the Arctic winter trapped his crew for months, starving and freezing in darkness. When summer came, Hudson wasn't ready to give up. He wanted to push further north. His men wanted to go home. On June 22, 1611, they mutinied. They forced Hudson, his teenage son, and a handful of loyal sailors into a small open boat and cut them loose. They drifted into the fog and were never seen again. No wreck, no bones, no goodbye. Hudson's vanishing became one of exploration's oldest mysteries. Did they freeze, starve, join indigenous communities? His maps reshaped global trade routes, yet his own ending remains unwritten. In chasing the horizon, Henry Hudson became part of it, swallowed by the very sea he was trying to chart.
Glenn Hyde, the honeymoon expedition that never came home. In 1928, Glenn Hyde and his new bride, Bessie, set out to do what no one else had done: run the full length of the Grand Canyon by boat, and make history together. He was 29, she was 22. They were young, ambitious, and dangerously confident. Glenn had built their wooden sweep scow himself, 30 feet long, sturdy, and old school. They planned to set a speed record and sell the story to fund their married life. They were last seen near Hermit Rapid in November, smiling for another rafting party. When they didn't reach their destination, search teams followed the river. Weeks later, they found the boat, upright, perfectly intact, all supplies inside. But Glenn and Bessie? Gone. No footprints, no torn clothing, no bodies. Some say Glenn drowned, others claim Bessie killed him after weeks of tension and walked away. Local legends whispered she reappeared years later as an older woman who quietly admitted, "I am Bessie Hyde." What makes it enduring is that the mystery feels so cinematic. Two lovers, a handmade boat, a canyon older than time, and a story that just stops. Glenn Hyde set out to conquer nature, but nature left him unsolved, turning a honeymoon adventure into one of America's most haunting open cases. René-Robert Cavelier de la Salle, the explorer betrayed by his own dream. René-Robert Cavelier de la Salle was one of France's boldest explorers, a man who believed he could carve a French empire across North America. Born into privilege in the 1600s, he traded comfort for conquest, mapping the Great Lakes, sailing the Mississippi, claiming the vast Louisiana territory for King Louis XIV. In that age, exploration was also science, cartography, natural history, anthropology, all rolled into survival. But ambition breeds enemies. In 1687, after years of hardship and failed resupply voyages, La Salle led a shrinking expedition through the swamps of what's now Texas, desperate to reach French outposts to the east. Starving, lost, and surrounded by mutinous men, he was shot by one of his own. His body was stripped and left in the brush. It was never found. La Salle had redrawn the map of half a continent, yet his own resting place vanished into the wilderness. Centuries later, that missing body still feels symbolic. The man who gave France an empire dissolved into the same unknown he'd spent his life trying to define. In the end, the conqueror became his own lost discovery. Henry Moseley, the physicist who counted the elements but lost to war. Henry Moseley was the kind of scientist you build statues for. Born in 1887, educated at Oxford, he was just in his 20s when he rewrote the periodic table. Before him, elements were arranged by guesswork. Moseley used X-rays to reveal their true atomic numbers, giving chemistry its mathematical order. It was genius, simple, clear, unshakable. In 1914, he stood on the edge of a Nobel Prize. Then came World War I. Patriotic and restless, Moseley left the lab and joined the British Army as a signals officer. A man who could measure atoms was suddenly measuring artillery coordinates. In 1915, at the Battle of Gallipoli, a bullet struck him through the head. 27 years old. His body was never positively identified. Historians still call it one of science's greatest losses. The Nobel Committee soon changed its rules, refusing to honor anyone posthumously. One man's death literally reshaped scientific tradition. The tragedy of Henry Moseley isn't just the war that took him, it's the progress he might have given us, the equations he never finished. A brain that organized the universe couldn't survive the chaos of human conflict. Frederick Valentich, the pilot who vanished into the sky. On October 21, 1978, 20-year-old pilot Frederick Valentich radioed air traffic control from above Bass Strait, Australia. He said a dark, metallic object was hovering above his plane, not an aircraft. The transmission went quiet. Controllers heard a strange metallic screech, then nothing. His single-engine Cessna disappeared from radar. No wreckage has ever been found. Valentich was a devoted student of aviation and obsessed with flying, by all accounts cautious and disciplined. When the news broke, theories exploded. Some said he became disoriented and crashed at sea. Others whispered UFO abduction. A few insist it was staged, that he fled intentionally. But the facts never squared. No distress beacon, no debris, no oil slick. Only that eerie recording and endless ocean. His story struck a nerve in Cold War-era Australia when both technology and fear of the unknown were at their peak. Valentich wanted to study the sky, and the sky swallowed him whole. Whether he met a secret craft or simply his own fate, his name endures as the man who may have turned his final flight into Australia's most enduring modern legend. Ettore Majorana, the genius who calculated himself out of existence. In the 1930s, Ettore Majorana was whispered about in physics circles as different, the kind of mind that made even Enrico Fermi stop talking to listen. He predicted particles that would be their own antiparticles, and ideas so far ahead of its time that scientists still search for the Majorana fermion today. He was shy, reclusive, brilliant, and deeply anxious about the moral direction of science. In March 1938, he boarded a ship from Palermo to Naples and vanished. No body, no luggage, no ticket record after docking. Letters surfaced later. One seemed like a goodbye note. Another asked people not to worry. For decades, theories multiplied. Suicide, monastery exile, kidnapping by fascist agents. Even a photo surfaced of a man in South America who looked exactly like him, decades older. What makes Majorana haunting isn't just the disappearance, it's that it fits him. A man whose career blurred matter and antimatter seemed to slip between life and death with the same symmetry he studied. Maybe he left physics out of guilt over how his research could be weaponized. Maybe he proved you can disappear if you understand the math well enough. Whatever the truth, Ettore Majorana remains the only scientist who might have turned his own life into an experiment on vanishing. Harold Holt, the Prime Minister who walked into the sea. December 17, 1967. Australia's leader, Harold Holt, an athletic 59-year-old known for his love of ocean swimming, dives into the surf at Cheviot Beach near Melbourne and is never seen again. Within minutes, rough waves pull him under. His security staff and friends rush in. No body, no trace. The disappearance of a sitting prime minister sparked one of the wildest mysteries in modern history. Search teams used helicopters, divers, and hundreds of volunteers. Not even a wetsuit washed ashore. Theories exploded. Did he drown? Fake his death? Defect to a Chinese submarine? Fall victim to a spy plot? Officially, it was ruled accidental drowning, but Australians were unconvinced. Leaders don't just vanish before camera phones existed. What makes Holt's story eerie is how ordinary it began. A morning swim, a bright day, and then his nation lost its voice mid-sentence. For decades, the Harold Holt mystery symbolized how fragile certainty is. Here was a man leading a country, surrounded by guards and press, yet the ocean still claimed him without a clue. It wasn't just a disappearance, it was a national reminder that control, no matter how powerful, is an illusion when nature decides otherwise.
Robert R. Hoagland, the man who stepped out of suburbia and into oblivion. Robert R. Hoagland seemed like anyone's quiet neighbor in Newtown, Connecticut. A computer technician, husband, and father of two, he lived a standard suburban life until July 28, 2013. That morning, he was last seen mowing his lawn. By afternoon, his car sat in the driveway, wallet and ID on the kitchen counter, phone on the charger, half-prepared lunch on the table. And yet, Robert himself had simply vanished. At first, it looked like a crime scene, but there were no signs of a break-in or struggle. Days turned to weeks, no bank activity, no passport use, nothing. He left everything except the clothes on his back. Detectives followed every lead. Nothing fit. Then, almost a decade later, in December 2022, a shocking call came from Rock Hill, New York. Police there found a dead man who'd been quietly renting a room under the name Richard King. Fingerprints confirmed what seemed impossible. It was Hoagland. He'd been living under a false identity for 9 years, working odd jobs, paying rent on time, talking little. No major debts, no criminal charges, no hidden fortune. Just disappearance for disappearance's sake. Why he left remains unknown. Midlife crisis, secret illness, mental strain? His case has become a mirror for modern anxiety, that even in a digital world, you can vanish if you truly choose to stop being found. Louis Le Prince, the forgotten father of film who faded from the frame. Before Edison or the Lumiere brothers, Louis Le Prince had already created moving pictures. A French inventor living in England, he filmed short scenes in 1888, years before anyone else, an achievement that could have made him the true father of cinema. But on September 16, 1990, while traveling by train from Dijon to Paris, he disappeared. The train arrived, his luggage arrived, yet Le Prince did not. There was no ransom, no witnesses, no body. He simply dissolved from history. His family claimed Edison stole his ideas. Lawsuits later tried to prove it but failed. Others whispered suicide, murder, or even espionage. 2 years later, his camera patents suddenly turned up in Edison's legal battles, fueling suspicion that invention and theft had collided. Le Prince's disappearance did more than erase a man. It rewrote history. Without him to defend his work, Edison took the crown as the inventor of motion pictures. Le Prince's family spent generations trying to restore his credit. Even today, scholars still debate how close he was to revolutionizing the world before being erased by mystery. In his story, the first flicker of cinema ended not with applause, but with an empty train seat. A genius literally gone between frames. Percy Fawcett, the explorer who tried to map a myth. Colonel Percy Fawcett was the last of the Romantic explorers, a British surveyor, archaeologist, and adventurer obsessed with uncharted jungles. By 1925, he'd mapped vast regions of South America for the Royal Geographical Society and claimed to have seen signs of an ancient, hidden civilization he called Z. He believed it existed deep within the Amazon, proof that Europe wasn't the only birthplace of greatness. Scholars laughed, he swore he'd prove them wrong. At 57, accompanied by his son Jack and his son's friend Raleigh Rimmel, he vanished into the dense Mato Grosso. Their last telegram said, "All well, proceeding into unexplored region." Then silence. No rescue team ever found them. Decades later, bones and rumors surfaced. Tribes described strangers, journalists chased clues, but nothing definitive emerged. What keeps Fawcett's legend alive isn't only the disappearance, it's the idea behind it. He went looking for lost knowledge, convinced faith and science could coexist. Did he die in the jungle, join an indigenous tribe, or find something meant to stay hidden? Fawcett's story is less about being lost, it's about the cost of chasing absolute belief. In the end, he may have reached Z after all, because he became its myth.
Agha Waqar Ahmad, the inventor who claimed to run cars on water. In 2012, Pakistan stopped to watch a man it thought could save the world. Engineer Agha Waqar Ahmad stood before cameras demonstrating what he called the water fuel kit, a device that, he said, split water into hydrogen and oxygen to power engines cheaply and cleanly. Within days, ministers and TV hosts hailed him as a national genius. If true, it would rewrite global energy and make oil obsolete. But scientists demanded proof. Independent tests showed the math didn't work. The energy required to split water outweighed what the engine produced. Waqar waved off critics as threatened elites. The hype curdled to humiliation. As backlash grew, the man who just weeks earlier filled newsrooms disappeared from public life entirely. No interviews, no lab photos, no verified updates. Some believe he retreated out of shame, others that political or corporate pressure silenced him. Whatever the cause, Agha Waqar's vanishing became symbolic, how easily hope and desperation can collide in a struggling economy. He promised an invention that defied physics, and when the numbers failed, he seemed to erase himself. One day a national hero, the next a ghost of lost potential, leaving behind only a single unsolved question. What if he was right? Arthur Upfield, the writer who predicted a perfect crime, then vanished into his own plot. Arthur Upfield was more than just a novelist. He was a bush naturalist, amateur geologist, and sometime boundary writer who knew Australia's outback like the lines in his hands. In the 1920s and 30s, he turned that rough knowledge into one of the first successful Australian detective series, creating the half-Aboriginal sleuth Napoleon Bonaparte. His research trips doubled as field studies: rocks, fossils, soil types, scientific notes blended into fiction. Then came the chilling twist. In 1929, while outlining his new book, Upfield discussed with friends how a murderer could dispose of a body so perfectly that no evidence would remain. Burn it, sift the ashes, scatter what's left. Months later, an actual murder matched his description almost exactly. Investigators even questioned Upfield himself to be sure he wasn't involved. He wasn't, but the coincidence made him infamous as the writer who accidentally inspired a real killer. After that, he drifted across deserts collecting material, often going missing for long stretches with no mail or word, returning suddenly as though the bush had given him back. In those periods, rumors said he'd vanished, and maybe he did, into the endless horizon he kept writing about. Arthur Upfield reminds us that imagination and reality can merge until even the storyteller becomes part of the mystery he created. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the pilot poet who never landed. Author, aviator, engineer, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry lived on the thin line between sky and story. Long before The Little Prince made him immortal, he was a pioneering airmail pilot mapping dangerous routes over Africa and South America. Flying, to him, was science, philosophy, and religion combined. Metal, math, and poetry. On July 31, 1944, during World War II, he took off from Corsica in his Lockheed P-38 on a reconnaissance mission over occupied France and never returned. No call for help, no radar trace. For decades, nothing but speculation. A crash, enemy fire, sabotage, suicide. Then, in 1998, a fisherman found his silver ID bracelet offshore near Marseille. Years later, divers discovered pieces of his plane scattered on the seabed, but no body. It felt poetic. A man who wrote about fragile dreams and vanishing innocence literally dissolved into the sky. Saint-Exupéry's disappearance became an allegory for his own philosophy, that what's essential is invisible to the eye. Perhaps he crashed, perhaps he'd transcended. Either way, the pilot who taught the world to see with the heart simply kept flying until the horizon refused to give him back.